Hello, my name is Elizabeth Ashley and I'm the author of the Secret Healer books. And I'm guessing you found me because you've entered the term, what is Copaiba essential oil used for? I'm not surprised. So many people want to understand what this oil is for, especially since Doterra started hyping it at their 2017 convention, but also it's one of the starter oils, I understand, in the Young Living Essential Oil kit. So I am really fascinated by this particular oil, and I became interested in it when I started to research my cannabis book, because it is in some ways quite related to cannabis medicine, but we'll come back to that in a little while. First of all, let's talk about what it is. Well, first of all, Copaiba is a tree, and it comes from a tree that grows to around about 15 to 30 meters tall, so it's very, very tall tree. A deciduous tree. It has big black branches, and then small little flowers grow in panicles off it. And every year it puts out, or actually, sorry, every other year it puts out little seed pods, which, if I remember rightly, are orange. And then inside each seed pod there's 2 or 3 seeds, and it buds up very, very early in the spring and drops its leaves late in autumn, and it's all very dependent on rainfall. So as long as it's got plenty of water to draw on, it will hold its leaves for a long, long time. But if there's not much, then it'll drop them very quickly. And like I say, it is, I'm guessing we say it's a biennial because it only fruits every other year. And in actual fact, it comes from a species called Copaiba. So if you read your Latin name, we're talking about Copaiba officinalis or Langsdorffii. And the Copaiba genus that contains 35 different types of Copaiba trees mainly throughout South America, although there are also some in Africa, I understand. And the three main Copaiba genesis that we're interested in aromatherapy are Copaiba officinalis, Copaiba Langsdorffii, and Copaiba reticulata, and all of them fall under the name Copaiba. You can probably tell, obviously look on your bottle and you'll be able to say which one it is. But Langsdorffii grows mainly through the tropical savannas of Brazil. Reticulata and officinalis grow throughout South America. And what we've got here, although it's called Copaiba balsam, it's actually what's called an oleoresin. It's a misnomer, it's not a balsam at all. And what happens is the tree manufactures this oil resin inside of the wood, and if there's like little gaps in between the wood, it fills them with this resin, and it actually swells almost as if it's pregnant, unbelievably. And what they do is they put a tap in and they just let it flow out, very much like if you've seen maple syrup being harvested. The oleoresin flows out very much a similar way as the maple syrup would do, and it comes out in huge amounts. It can actually secrete up to 40 litres annually, and so it's an incredibly sustainable crop because they don't have to knock it down or do anything like that. They just get this, well, it's like, I suppose, like a sap, even though it's not a sap, out of the tree that the tree wants to distribute anyway, and then they can come back and tap it again, and then this oleoresin is then distilled. So when it comes out of the tree, it comes out as a liquid, and then it goes more shaking, you know what I'm doing, I'm tapping on my notes on the computer at the same time, but I gave myself away, didn't I? So when it comes into air, it gets harder, and then they can distill it. So the difficulty with a lot of essential oils is we really only have 2 ways of being able to discern what they're for. So the first is from scientific evidence, The second is from studies of how indigenous people have used it. And actually, usually when we look at scientific evidence these days, they're not actually looking for uses. They will say, right, well, this is how it's used in indigenous medicine. We want to understand why that works. So they're not looking for proof, they're looking for an understanding. Now, in actual fact, in copaiba oil per se, there is very, very little scientific evidence to draw on. So what we're having to go to is completely indigenous medicine, which is really, really interesting. It's what I love, I have to say. So first of all, let me tell you that the very darkest resin comes from trees in Venezuela. So different areas of trees will give a slightly different chemistry. And in actual fact, with copaiba oil, the chemistry varies inordinately. And we're going to talk in a little bit about a constituent called beta-caryophyllene. That's where this comes in with the cannabis medicine, and probably why the world's gone mad for the essential oil. But first, let's look at the indigenous medicines, and then we'll start to understand, okay, this is what they saw. So let's have a look. Right, so down the Rio Salomis, have you ever seen that? First of all, it's like there's a place where the Rio Salomis joins the River Nigra, I think, and the two, because they're completely different colours of water, and they run at different speeds and different temperatures, so the waters don't merge. So you've got this black water and this white water, and around that area there are big congregations of tribes, and around those areas they use the resin, and it is the resin, not the essential oil, it's the oleoresin, for a wound healer, to stop bleeding, to heal sores and psoriasis, and also as a medication for gonorrhea. Now that's interesting, we'll come back to that in a minute. So right the way through the Amazon, actually, everybody who comes into contact with copaiba resin uses it for skin disorders, for insect bites, and to calm inflammation. That's a very important one, we'll come back to that in a minute. In Brazilian medicine, they use it as an antiseptic and as an expectorant. So if you're coughing but not much is coming up, copaiba is very good for being able to shift the rubbish off your chest. And they use it for all manner of respiratory problems, from sinusitis right through to bronchitis. They use it as an anti-inflammatory, as I said, but also as an antiseptic. And problems with the urinary tract, so bladder infections, kidney infections, cystitis, don't know, can't think of any more, but any kind of bladder infection, it's a very, very good one to use. And incidentally, I'm going through the uses very, very quickly. I'll put a link at the bottom to my blog page, where I've actually written you some recipes of how I would use copaiba oil in different recipes. So I think there is one for sitz-bats, for genitourinary problems. There's also some ones for coughing, ones for inflammation. So yeah, if you want to visit there, you'll find there are essential oil recipes using copaiba oil for these problems. Okay, they also use it for vaginal discharge. I'm sorry, I hope you weren't eating your tea or your dinner. For pneumonia, well, obviously, yeah, respiratory conditions, but also dandruff. And I have found it very, very useful for dandruff, I have to say. Now, interestingly, if you go into a chemist in Brazil, you'll find gel capsules of copaiba, and they use these as an internal remedy for anything that's going on inside. So that could be stomach ulcers, any kind of inflammation, and they even use it against cancer. Whether you want to go down that route is up to you. I have to say that I'm not really usually an advocate of internal use of essential oils. They're they're too potent, and if you don't know what you're doing, then it's easy to have an accident. but most of the traditional medicine using Copaiba, using the resin, not the essential oil, using the resin, is internal medicine. And actually, one of the most common Brazilian remedies of using it is to pop a few granules of the resin into warm water and gargle it for like sore throats and tonsillitis. And I love Copaiba oil for that. And actually, I do just use the essential oil, 1 or 2 drops in a pint of water, warm water, gargle it. And I also, because I'm really quite pathetic with pain, I also put half an aspirin in, just so that it coats the skin and the membranes and calms down the inflammation. So it's kind of hedging my bets really between the different medicines. Peruvian medicine, it's quite exciting, isn't it? So in Peruvian medicine, urinary balancer, they, on one hand, they use it for incontinence. On the other hand, they use it to increase urination. So they use it to balance. So we're not saying that it reduces, and we're not saying that it's diuretic. It's a balancer of fluids, which is very, very interesting. So any kind of urinary problem, didn't think of those earlier, did I? They use it for stomach ulcers, syphilis, tetanus, bronchitis, catarrh, herpes, pleurisy, tuberculosis, hemorrhages and leishmaniasis, where they use it with a plaster with a balsam laid on top of it. Leishmaniasis, for some of you that don't know, is like a parasitic infection that causes skin disorders that look like eczema, and I talk about it quite a lot in one of my oil books, maybe Holy Basil, I think is in there. Okay, so most of that information, I have to say, was very easy for me to come across, and I want to say a big thank you to Leslie Taylor for her book, The Healing Power of Rainforest Herbs. Made it very, very easy for me. So let's talk about a little bit about the CB2 receptor, which is the reason why people are excited to buy beta-caryophyllene. So the endocannabinoid system was discovered when scientists were investigating how cannabis did such extraordinary things to the body and how it made them better in so many ways. And in the early 1990s, they discovered that there was an endocrine system that they had no idea had existed before, and it seemed to be modulated by cannabis constituents, in particular THC, the psychoactive component, and also cannabidiol, which we call CBD, and I'm sure you've seen high CBD hemp oil or CBD oil. And the endocannabinoid system is comprised of 2 main receptors. There are undoubtedly more, and I do talk about this at length in my cannabis oil book, but you have to be very motivated to want to know this. So just the first 2 is enough, right? So the first endocannabinoid system, the CB1 receptor, is found predominantly in the brain, and it modulates memory, appetite, itching, cognition, nausea, and can be affected by many different constituents in cannabis oil, but particularly by delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC. The CB2 receptor, which is the one that we're interested in with Copaiba oil, modulates pain, immunity, and inflammation. And these receptors are really, really tiny, and the CB2 receptors are found in the periphery of the body, so not in the core, further out into the periphery, and they're predominantly on lymphatic tissue and blood cells, and we find them on the surface of a cell. So if you can imagine how tiny a cell is. These are distributed right across the body. So if you can imagine that we could find a way to modulate the CB2 receptor, in principle, that means that we could reduce inflammation, we could reduce pain, we could improve immunity. And they have found that outside of cannabis, there are some other constituents in nature that can do a similar thing. And we call these cannabimimetics. Don't ask me to say that again because it just went right there first. But the important thing is mimetics. In other words, they mimic what cannabis would do. And one of these cannabimimetics is beta-caryophyllene. Now, beta-caryophyllene is found in many different essential oils, but incredibly high amounts within copaiba oil. And I'm going to do another little video in a minute about what beta-caryophyllene does in nature. But in effect, what it does is protects the body, protects the plant when it's injured and calls reinforcements to it. More detailed than that, but that's what it does. And if we can use oils like Copaiba, then we can get this to happen within our own body. So we summon things together to reduce inflammation, to reduce pain, and to increase immunity. So if you think back amongst all of those things that we talked about with the indigenous medicine, on every occasion they were using it to calm inflammation, weren't they? So they were absolutely right. They'd watched and that's what was happening, and now we understand it's because it interacts with this CB2 receptor. They were using it for genitourinary medicine and for respiratory medicine. And again, we see inflammation, we see pain, and we see changes in immunity. So yeah, so how do we use it? Well, as I say, go to my blog page. The details are in the write-up below, but the name of the blog is How Do Essential Oils Work? And I've written you, I don't know, I think maybe 10-15 recipes of how I use it. But in effect, the best way I feel to use it is, if you're using it on the physical body, to use it topically. So to make things easy, we'll say, right, a tablespoon of carrier oil, maybe 3 drops of essential oil. So we can say Copaiba on its own, or we could say, right, we want to deal with inflammation. So other oils that would deal with inflammation that would increase that would be Roman camomile's anti-inflammatory, frankincense is anti-inflammatory, myrrh is anti-inflammatory, juniper flushes out the joints. So if we've got things like, well, actually, it would work for inflammation in terms of swollen joints, but it would also work in terms of inflammation in the waterworks. So juniper, fennel, cypress, all of those blended. You could use one, you could use as many as you want. Blended with Copaiba oil will help to deal with the inflammation. With immunity, very, very simple. We're going to use things like tea tree, manuka, kanuka. Maybe if you really want something strong, we could go cinnamon or clove, although they're a bit harsh on the skin for my liking. But that's what we do. So as I say, if you look at my blog post, you'll see some ideas of how to use it there. I hope that helps. It's a very, very interesting oil, very, very useful oil. So don't leave it at the back of your box and go, don't know. It's incredibly, incredibly gentle. Going back to the glorious subject of gonorrhea, syphilis, vaginal discharge. When I was looking through our medicine here in this country, I was looking at papers from sort of the 1840, 1850. Loads and loads and loads of adverts by the apothecaries here saying, oh, we treat gonorrhea, we treat da 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 using Copaiba balsam. But then as we got to about 1870, a guy called Franks decided that he didn't really like the side effects that Copaiba was giving people. I was like, oh, side effects. Nobody mentioned side effects. And then I came across some amazing pictures of lots and lots of scaling on the body from using too much, and also horrific nausea apparently from taking large amounts of internal Copaiba. What's a large amount? Well, that's the issue, isn't it? So that's why I say probably don't use it internally, then you're not going to worry, are you? But yes, yeah, so it was very interesting to see that he was a real stalwart of the London pharmacopoeia, and of course that would have changed when antibiotics came in. People wanted the real deal, but now we're obviously looking and going, oh well, what did we lose then? So yeah, have a look at the blog post. Lots and lots of recipes. Couple more videos that you might find useful, and I'm going to put some bits and pieces. I'm going to show you a little bit about that wonderful river because it's extraordinary. Hope that's useful to you, and see you again.